Painted wooden signs add the perfect homespun touch to your decor. Chances are you've probably seen endless variations of these signs at craft and home goods stores. And the best part is it's easier than ever to make your very own custom sign with a Cricut machine. Now, with my tips and tricks, you will be able to create professional looking painted wooden signs for any occasion. If you're new here, welcome to Sweet Red Poppy. I'm Kim, and if you love all things Cricut, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I cover every new product release, I create step-by-step tutorials, and I share free SVG files. Now, my goal is to help you become a confident Cricut user and really to get the very most out of your machine. Now, if the idea of painting makes you a little bit nervous, don't worry. I teamed up with Cricut to show you how to create foolproof stencils using the Cricut Maker 3 and Smart Vinyl. If you're using a different model of Cricut machine, you can still follow along with this tutorial. I will be sharing my tried and true tips and tricks, and they apply to all machines. This technique will instill confidence in both seasoned and novice crafters alike. And the best part is no professional painting experience is required. Now, if you've recently acquired a Cricut Maker 3, its ability to cut smart materials is one of the most exciting features. For this project, I'm going to show you how to use Smart Vinyl to make your own custom stencil. Let's go ahead and get started. For this project, you're going to need the following supplies: a Cricut Maker 3 that's loaded with the fine point blade, permanent Cricut Smart Vinyl. Although I'm using permanent vinyl, you will not be able to reuse the stencil. Permanent vinyl just simply performs better for this project. You'll also need Cricut transfer tape, a scraper tool, as well as a weeding tool. And you will need a wooden sign. I'm using a circular wooden sign on this. You may need sandpaper. This is only necessary if your wooden sign has a really rough texture. You'll need matte Mod Podge, as well as a flathead or stencil paintbrush, acrylic paint in any color of your choice, and then optional, an acrylic spray sealant. This is only if you plan on hanging your sign outside. Now, if you're following along with this tutorial with a different type of cutting machine, you will also need a standard grip mat, as well as some regular permanent vinyl. Step 1, create the design in Cricut Design Space. I'm going to create my stencil within Cricut Design Space. Now, this software is free to access when you have a Cricut machine. To get started on your project, go ahead and open up Cricut Design Space. This can be accessed from your phone, your tablet, or even your computer. In this tutorial, I am going to be working from Design Space on my laptop computer. So if you're using a tablet or a phone, it may look slightly different. Don't worry, you'll still have all the same functionality and you'll be able to follow along with the steps. Now, let's start by clicking on the plus sign to create a new project. In the top right-hand corner, make sure that your experience is being optimized for your specific cutting machine. This is going to change the options that Design Space gives you based on your machine's capabilities. I'm going to begin by creating a replica of the design and the shape of my wooden sign that I'll be using. This is going to allow me to create a stencil that's sized for my project. So I am using a circular wooden round, and this measures about 14 inches. So I'm going to use the shape tool on the left-hand side toolbar to do this. While I'm creating a rounded design, feel free to use any style of a wooden base for this tutorial to customize your signs to your own personal style. Go ahead and upload and insert the Home Sweet Home file from Design Space. Size and then center your design within your shape's parameters using the alignment tool. Highlight both the shape as well as the phrase, and then select Attach to position both of your designs together. Now, once you have your design ready, you can click Make It in the top right-hand corner to view the preview screen. After you click Continue, the screen is going to prompt you to connect your machine. You'll want to make sure that your cutting machine is turned on and that it's either connected to your device via a Bluetooth or a USB cable. Next, you'll be able to select the material that you're planning on using. Now, I am using permanent vinyl, and this is Smart Vinyl. You don't need to use Smart Vinyl for this project unless it's compatible with your machine. However, you do need to make sure that the vinyl is labeled as being permanent. Although this is said to be permanent vinyl, you'll still be able to remove it from your wooden sign. Personally, I just prefer using permanent vinyl because the adhesive is a little bit stronger and it helps to prevent any bleeding. And I find it gives me better results than using removable or even stencil vinyl. Now, you might remember my glass etching video where I used permanent vinyl as my stencil, and that's just because it works really well in this application. Go ahead and set your machine material settings according to the vinyl that you're planning on using. Step 2, load the mat and cut the design. Make sure that your Cricut is loaded with your fine point blade. I like to double check that my blade is clean, and I do that by pushing down on the plunger and then gently blowing away any debris that may have collected on the tip. With the Cricut Maker 3 and the Explore 3 and Smart Vinyl, you don't actually need to use a cutting mat. So you'll simply just load your vinyl face up into the machine and cut. It's easy breezy. If you're using a different Cricut machine, take a moment to remove the clear plastic liner from your Cricut mat and then apply your vinyl to your mat. Next, insert your mat or your smart materials into the machine by sliding it under the white guides and pressing the load arrow button. Then you can press the blinking play button. If you're using an older model, this might appear as a C, and your Cricut will begin to cut. Design space is going to count from 0 all the way to 100, just to let you know how far along in this cutting process you are. Now, before you unload your mat, you need to double check that the material has been cut all the way through. Are you ready for one of my pro Cricut tips? If it hasn't cut all the way through, you can send it back for another pass just simply by clicking on the play button or the C button. Unfortunately, if you've already unloaded your material, you won't be able to do this. Now, once your material has finished cutting and you're happy with the result, press the arrow button and that's going to release your material. Personally, I love that you don't have to peel the mat away from the vinyl when you're using these smart materials. Step 3, apply the design. The next step is weeding your design. Because this is a stencil, you want to weed away the positive space. Now, this is the opposite of most vinyl projects where you would want to weed away the negative space. So think of it kind of like you're removing any portion where you would like to apply paint. In this case, we are going to weed the letters and the space outside of the circle. Now, after you have finished weeding your design, place a piece of transfer tape that's large enough to cover the entire design over the vinyl. Then you'll want to burnish down lightly with a scraper tool, and that's going to transfer the vinyl from its backing to the transfer tape. Then you can carefully remove the backing of your vinyl. Next, position your vinyl onto your wooden sign. You'll want to do this carefully, ensuring that it's centered on both sides. Now you can burnish the vinyl down with a scraper tool and then gently remove the transfer tape. You want to take care to make sure that all of the vinyl sticks onto your sign. Now, if you're making multiple signs, you can even save your transfer tape for your next project. Once the transfer tape is completely removed, go over the vinyl again with that little scraper tool and remove any bubbles that might have surfaced. Sometimes I'll even use my fingers on this step. If you happen to have any exposed wood on your sign that you don't want to get paint on, use some masking tape just to protect those areas. Step 4, apply Mod Podge and let it dry. Now here is where we are going to use our secret weapon, and that is Mod Podge. This is really the key to avoiding any paint bleeds. The Mod Podge is going to create a clear seal between the vinyl and the wood, and that keeps any paint from accidentally seeping underneath. There are a few different varieties of Mod Podge, but you'll want to make sure that you're using the matte Mod Podge for your wooden sign. Wood has more of a matte finish, so if any Mod Podge accidentally seeps underneath, it's going to leave a clear matte finish that's hardly visible. If by chance you were stenciling on a painted surface with a really glossy finish, then you could use just normal Mod Podge, and that would give you a little bit of a shinier finish. With a paintbrush, coat a thin layer of Mod Podge in all of the exposed areas of your stencil. You'll want to paint in both directions, but remember, keep your layers really thin. If it's too thick, it will make removing your vinyl stencil trickier in the end. Go ahead and let the Mod Podge dry completely. I would recommend that you let it dry for at least an hour. I'm going to set this sign aside and grab another sign I prepared earlier that's had a bit of time to dry. Step 5, paint your sign. Now for the painting. I'm going to use this high quality flat-headed stencil brush, and this brush is ideal for this pouncing technique that we're going to be using to paint our sign. Now, pouncing is a stencil painting term, and it's used to describe painting in an up and down dabbing motion as opposed to using longer vertical or horizontal swoops. It's another method I'm using just to reduce the chances of any of my paint bleeding underneath my stencil. Now, if you've watched my tutorial on custom doormats, you might remember me using the same technique in that video to prevent bleeding. Go ahead and apply some paint to your brush, but brush off the majority of it. This is called the dry brush technique. You want to avoid heavily saturating your paintbrush when you apply it to your board because it's much better if you can do multiple thin coats of paint as opposed to one really thick coat of paint. So go ahead, dip your brush in the paint and then pat off most of the excess paint. The pouncing technique does tend to leave a little extra texture, but you can smooth it out by using a cosmetic sponge. Just gently dab and then smooth away any unwanted paint. Now, the amount of layers that you paint will really depend on your desired finished look. If you want to achieve an opaque finish, then repeat with another layer or even two once the prior layer is almost dry. For a more rustic or even a farmhouse appearance, you may only want to do one thin layer. Personally, I want really sharp and clean lines for my sign, so I'm going to paint multiple layers. Step 6, remove the vinyl stencil. Now, once you're satisfied with your paint coverage, wait until the paint is just barely dry to the touch, or even still a little bit tacky, and then you can remove your stencil. If you wait until your paint is completely dry, there is a higher chance that the paint is going to peel off with your stencil. Peeling the stencil off in the opposite direction of the wood grain is going to further reduce the chance of peeling paint as well. Now, don't worry about ripping your stencil as you're removing it because again, we can't reuse this type of stencil. For any small area of your stencil that's really tricky to remove by hand, go ahead and use your weeding tool and then carefully lift those areas off. Step 7, touch up any imperfections. If you do happen to get small areas where maybe your paint peels up or even it goes underneath, you can use a toothpick or even a straight pin in replacement of a paintbrush, and this is for those really little tiny touch-ups. These have a really small surface area for the paint and it gives you a lot of control and it allows you to fix any mishaps. Once you've removed your entire stencil and made any touch-ups that are necessary, let your wood sign dry completely. Step 8, seal the wooden sign. Finally, apply a thin coat of spray sealant in a well-ventilated area to your finished sign. Now this is going to protect and seal your sign so that it holds up better against the elements, which is really important, especially if you plan on hanging your sign outside. Once your sealant is dry, you can customize your sign even further. You can do this by adding in a bow, adding some greenery along the top, or even some flowers. The possibilities for customization are endless. Your custom Cricut made sign is now complete and no one would ever guess that it's handmade. Isn't it beautiful? Now that you've mastered the art of creating custom stencils with your Cricut, the sky is the limit. Now I would love to see the wooden signs that you're making with this technique. Go ahead and let me know if you have any questions and leave them in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and feel free to share it on social media. Don't forget to subscribe to Sweet Red Poppy for even more Cricut tutorial videos.